What is the difference between an RIA and a broker-dealer? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA question and answer series. It is episode number 127. Hi, I'm Brad Wales from Transition to RIA, where I help you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition your practice to the RIA model. If you're not already there, if you head on over to transitiontoria.com, you will find all of the resources I make available from this entire series in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, all kinds of things to help you better understand the RIA model. Again, transitiontoria.com. Okay, in today's episode, we're kind of bringing it back to the basics on this one of what is the difference with fundamentals and logistics and verbiage and whatnot between an RIA and a broker-dealer. And a couple reasons I want to make this episode. One, just for educational purposes, for folks that do not know what the differences are. And then we do, and I'll explain here as we go through it. Sometimes I hear the term, for instance, like broker-dealer thrown out there, and it is being used in some capacity, but it's also maybe alluding to something else as well. The same kind of thing could be along the guise of an RIA as well. So I thought it'd be good just to do a kind of a clarification episode of the differences between them. And then again, some of that verbiage of where they kind of come together. And this is further compounded by the fact that in our industry, unfortunately, there is no official, regulatorily defined definition of a quote unquote financial advisor. That, for the lack of a better part, is just kind of a generic term that is used by many different solution providers within the space that are providing at times many different kinds of solutions potentially to their end clients. So much so, that's why it's sometimes hard when you see stats or surveys that are put out and they're trying to identify how many financial advisors are there in the United States. And it's like, well, we struggle to really define exactly what that is, because who exactly do you include by that definition, or not for that matter? But usually it's understood to kind of mean somewhere in the range of about 300,000 quote unquote financial advisors, 300,000 or more in the United States, but again, generally in different capacities. So I kind of wanted to dive into what some of those definitions and logistics are. So we're going to talk broker-dealer, then we're going to talk RIA, and then I'll wrap up by just saying where there's a little overlap between them. So first up, what is a broker-dealer? So a broker-dealer is an entity, right? So you, an individual, are not a broker-dealer, but you might work underneath a broker-dealer, either as a W-2, again, financial advisor, or maybe you're a 1099 financial advisor. And it is in that capacity under a broker-dealer that enables you to provide solutions for your clients on a commission basis. So you are effectively selling them an investment product, an investment solution, and you are compensated for that in the form of a commission. So historically, go back decades, this was even done just to buy or sell an equity. You would have to turn to, and we'll get definitions here, a broker at a broker-dealer to transact that for you. Now, of course, there's to the degree people want to do this, there's the E-Trades of the world, you go online and do it yourself, but you had to go to a broker to buy or sell equities, and they were compensated on a commission basis for that. Broker-dealer under that capacity, you could also get a commission for selling a mutual fund, for perhaps selling a variable annuity. So again, it's an investment product that ultimately is being sold. The individual selling it is under a broker-dealer, and they're earning a commission for that. And so that individual is formally referred to as a registered representative. Others refer to them as a broker, a stockbroker, but registered representative is the official term of what that individual is when they're working, again, under the capacity of a broker-dealer. And to become a registered representative, you first must pass a qualifying exam. And for most individuals, that was the Series 7. Some folks also have taken the Series 6, and maybe that's still what they hold. And for those that aren't aware, 6 is kind of a more limited purpose version of the 7, but the 7 is the standard exam used to obtain the registered representative designation. And then you might also, due to state laws, have got the 63 exam as well. But again, traditionally, when we think of, oh, did you pass the exam to become a registered representative, we're talking about the Series 7. Now, in more recent years, there's even now kind of another little layer to that exam process called the SIE, the Securities Industry Essentials exam. And what that is the challenge with the 7 and the 6 and the 63 for that matter, and to this day, you cannot sit, as they say, for a Series 7 exam unless you are sponsored by a broker-dealer. So broker-dealer says, hey, this individual works for us, is affiliated with us. They are attempting to become a registered representative. So we are going as a broker-dealer. We have the ability to sponsor them, to enable them to sit for the 7. And so the challenge, right, for people new to the industry was, well, there's a lot of broker dealers out there that don't want to hire me until I have a 7, but I can't get the 7 until I'm with a broker dealer. And there was this kind of catch-22 issue. And so several years back, the industry, or FINRA, rolled out the SIE exam, again, the Securities Industries Essential exam, which anyone can sit for. It's a self-study, just like the 7 and 66, or the 6 and whatnot. But anyone that wants to go out and sit for the SIE can do so. You are not required to be sponsored by a broker dealer to be able to do that. And so now oftentimes the entryway in is that if you're trying to get in the industry, you would sit for the SIE, demonstrate your ability to learn the material and pass the exam. And then at that point, you're kind of more attractive to a broker dealer to say, okay, hey, now we will sponsor you to go ahead and take the 7. But the SIE by itself is not good enough to actually ultimately become a registered representative. It's essentially a prerequisite now for the 7 that you then have to pass. Now, just because you've passed that exam, the 7, that alone does not make you a registered representative. You then go back to your broker dealer and say, hey, I've passed this exam, which at that very moment you pass it, that's all you've done is just pass an exam. They then affiliate you or register you as a registered representative of their broker dealer. And so that's the kind of multi-steps. You got to pass the exam, then the broker dealer registers you as a registered representative, again, of their firm. And at that point, and I'm kind of going through some of these variables, and I'm going to talk about how they're different in the RIA space. You are now acting again in that commission capacity, which I talked about. And historically, your duty of care to clients was a suitability standard, meaning if a client came to you and there were 5 different mutual funds that you could potentially sell them, again, for commission, it didn't necessarily matter if one would generate a higher commission for you than another, as long as whichever one you were recommending was suitable based on the profile of that client. If that was the case, you were allowed to sell it to them. And that was the standard for many decades. More recently with Reg BI, Reg Best Interest, that's now a higher level of care, but it's not fully the fiduciary care, which is what happens in the RIA space. But just to kind of give you a little history lesson, it used to be solely suitability, a level that was the level of care. Now it's more of a best interest level of care, which is more so towards the client, but not entirely of the fiduciary standard. But that falls under the broker-dealer standpoint. And then just another 2 items here. In a registered representative capacity, because you're acting in that commission capacity, you cannot act with discretion as a registered representative. So if part of your value proposition to clients is, hey, clients, you bring me your assets, I'm going to manage those assets, and you don't even, you just give it to me and just we'll check in twice a year or whatever. You cannot, as a registered representative, you cannot place trades on a discretionary basis in that capacity. That is not allowed. It requires a fee-based solution, which we're going to contrast this to shortly. So keep in mind, as a registered representative, it is non-discretionary relationship with the client. And just to tie a bow on the broker-dealer and the registered representative and all that, for decades, that was the predominant way that a quote-unquote financial advisor operated. You, as a client, would go to your stockbroker to make a transaction. Again, whether it's an equity trade, a bond trade, whatnot. And there are many advisors, which I'll get into, that are still doing that in a large capacity, but generally not their sole capacity longer. But there was a time that was generally the sole capacity that advisors worked in was on that registered representative broker-dealer commission approach. So that's broker-dealer at a high level. Now let's jump over and compare it to an RIA. So keep in mind, an RIA stands for Registered Investment Advisor. Now, an RIA is an entity. No individual is an RIA, but yet you sometimes hear that term misused where some advisor will say, oh, I'm an RIA. That's like saying I'm a McDonald's. It's like, no, you might own a McDonald's, you might run a McDonald's, but you are not a McDonald's. But it is just common verbiage of someone will say, oh, I'm an RIA. No, they in theory should say I own an RIA or I run an RIA, but the RIA is the entity. And so underneath an RIA is what allows that, again, quote unquote, financial advisor to operate on a fee basis with clients. So they are not being paid a commission for every transaction that occurs. They're being paid on a fee basis. I did a recent episode on the different kinds of fees you can charge in that capacity, but by far the number one fee approach is that AUM fee, the proverbial 1% of assets. So as the client brings you assets, you charge them give or take 1%. You provide certain value in return for them, which often, but not always, involves managing the assets that are in the account. And no matter how little or a lot you trade, you're not, as the advisor, being paid a commission on any of that. You are solely getting that fee, in this example, that 1% AUM fee. And so when you're operating in that capacity, you are operating as the individual, as an IAR, investment advisor representative. So again, we have the RIA is the entity, the IAR is the individual that's acted in the capacity that I just described underneath that. So that is the comparable to a registered representative under a broker-dealer as far as kind of titles go. Now, to become an IAR of an RIA, it also requires generally some sort of exam process, just like it does under the broker-dealer process. The common exam required to become an IAR is the Series 65 exam. Some folks actually use the 66, which is technically a combination of the 65 and 63. And then many states, it varies by state, allow you to potentially exempt out of taking those exams if you have certain designations. So a common example would be a CFP or maybe a CPA. Again, it varies by state, but in most instances, if you were to have one of those, you might not have to take the 65 again, which is the common thing. But again, just passing the 65, all you've done is pass an exam. Congratulations, that is important. But then you go to an RIA, whether it's your own RIA or someone else's RIA, and they formally register you as, again, an investment advisor representative underneath the RIA. And in that capacity, that's what it's talking about, where you have to operate in a fiduciary standard with your client. You have to do, among other things, put their interests first above your own. The disclosure requirements are much more significant in the fee-based world than the commission-based world. So there's definitely a different standard of care, even though the suitability is kind of pushed closer to a fiduciary standard. Unfortunately, for better or worse, there is still a different approach to this. I think one day, and there's a lot of voices in the industry that are trying to say, hey, there just should be one duty of care, no matter how you're operating, no matter how you're getting paid on a commission or fee. We're not there yet. There is still some differences there. When you're in that fee arrangement as an IAR with a client, you can operate both on discretion or non-discretion. Now, most advisors that are operating as an IAR typically are operating with discretion with their client, because that's part of their value add for their clients is, hey, again, come to me. You don't want to worry about having to invest your assets. You're not experienced investing your assets. We're going to do that for you. We're going to maybe sit down with you 2-3 times a year and go over how the portfolio is doing. But rest assured, we will make the trades, and here's our investment philosophy. And by the way, client, we're not being compensated on any of those trades. There's no commission involved. Again, you're just paying us maybe that 1%, and we will act on discretion, do those trades on your behalf. But it is possible, if it makes sense for the IAR and the client, to also, if you elect to, have that relationship be a non-discretionary relationship similar to the broker-dealer world. And when I talked about the registered rep broker-dealer and kind of the historical context, and for going back decades, that was kind of the primary way the stockbroker operated. The world is increasingly moving more and more to the fee-based side of this house. So that's where the industry's going. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm a believer in the RIA space, but it is what it is. You look at the stats, increasingly more and more and more advisors are working with clients in a fee-based capacity, more so than a commission capacity. And I fully expect that trend to continue forward years, if not decades here to come. And so to just kind of tie a bow on where those kind of worlds combine a little bit is most quote unquote financial advisors. Again, we don't have a defined definition of that, but at many of the big, wirehouse firms or regional firms or even independent broker-dealer firms, many of those folks are wearing both of those hats. They are a registered rep of that firm's broker-dealer and also an investment advisor representative of the same firms, often referred to as corporate RIA. They are wearing both of those hats. So if a new client comes in and wants to hire the advisor for all the services they're going to provide, that advisor could potentially work with them on that commission broker-dealer basis, or potentially on that fee-only RIA basis, or maybe even a combination where it's, hey, one account's going to be this way and one account's going to be the other way. That is fairly typical. Now, the reality is, again, I've noted the industry continues to shift more and more to that fee-based side. And so it's interesting. We, as just one example, we commonly refer to independent broker-dealers out there. That's a term that's been around decades. There's some very large players in that space. You should join an independent broker-dealer. In most all instances, at least the major players, they are both a broker-dealer and an RIA, as I've been describing. And if you were to look at the underlying client assets of that independent quote-unquote broker-dealer, more of those client assets are now on the fee side of that relationship than the commission side. And so arguably, we shouldn't even be calling these firms independent broker-dealers any longer, because they are now more predominantly RIAs than they are broker-dealers. But because we've used that vernacular so long, it probably will stick around for quite some time. And you also see this even just referring to, say, wirehouses. And as an advisor, you should go join another broker-dealer. Well, typically when someone uses that kind of language, they're not suggesting, you go join a firm that is solely a broker-dealer. Because again, most quote-unquote financial advisors nowadays are wearing both of those hats, if not more so on the fee side. But yet we just refer to, example, wirehouse firms as broker-dealers because historically they essentially were only broker-dealers, and now, again, they've expanded more, and we've just been calling them that for so long. That's probably what we will continue to call them. But the main point of that, and this is kind of what I alluded to at the top, is you hear when someone just throws out, this advisor, you should join a broker-dealer, or you should change broker-dealers, or here's the independent path of the broker-dealer. That's typically, in many instances, referring to both some solution that's a broker-dealer and an RIA. But again, because of historical purposes, we just refer to them as broker-dealers. And then the final thing I'll just say, and I've done other episodes on this beyond the scope of this episode, is if you were to go down in the RIA path and transition your practice to the RIA path, you do not have to be solely fee-only, solely under an RIA, whether your own RIA or someone else's RIA. There is a way to be under an RIA and act in that capacity with your clients. And also, typically, because you have legacy commission assets, if you've been in the industry long enough, that maybe still need to be accommodated, there's ways to work in a so-called hybrid arrangement where you are under an RIA, and yet there's still a way to work with, often referred to as an RIA-friendly broker-dealer, to house your commission assets. Again, beyond the scope of this episode, but the takeaway is, don't go away from this episode thinking, if I want to go RIA, I have to be 100% fee-only. Many advisors choose to transition and go down a path where they are only 100% fee only. but that is not a requirement. And many advisors act in capacity of more of a hybrid capacity where they can still accommodate commission assets. Obviously, I'm happy to chat with you about that. And again, beyond the scope of this particular episode. So with that, like I said at the top, my name is Brad Wales with Transition to RIA. This is the sort of thing I help advisors with all day long, that oftentimes there's just a lot of education that goes in this. And hey, are we using the right vernacular? Are you fully understanding what I'm referring to, or what some solution providers referring to, or what your options are, and what they're calling themselves? And you really got to make sure you understand these semantics, because then even, like I said, it even gets blurred where arguably sometimes these terms like broker-dealer are used, and not maliciously, but are used in ways that mean more than just what it means at its core. So it's important to understand at its basics what this is and where these terms might be used beyond that. Certainly that's the kind of conversation I'm happy to have with you as well. But first things first though, head on over to transitiontoria.com. Where, as I noted, you can find all of the resources I make available to help you better understand the model. This entire series is available in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers. And at the top of every page is a contact link. If you click on that, you can instantly and easily schedule time to have a one-on-one conversation with me, whether you want to talk about today's topic or anything else RIA related. Again, head on over to transitiontoria.com. And with that, I hope you found value on today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.